Okay, my name is Kaitlyn Victoria, and today I'll be talking about educational opportunities in mass incarceration. I am a current junior at CFC and a poli-sci major on the pre-med track. And I was introduced to this research by Dr. McGinnis in her Democracy and Discipline class last fall. And it's something that's also close to my heart because as a Latina woman, I understand that a large portion of the prison population in the United States is people of color. And so it's a community I really care about. And so there's actually not a lot of research in this field. It's currently underdeveloped, and much of the research that has been done so far comes from the field of criminology. And so when they frame educational opportunities in mass incarceration in the field of criminology, they often use a framing of recidivism, and that's how they promote these programs to the public. But that framing can be really negative, especially when we look at it from the perspective of incarcerated Americans. And so some of you might be asking, what's wrong with recidivism framing? We all want less crime, obviously. But when we frame educational programs in the light of recidivism, what we're really doing is turning educational programs into a tool of kind of forced rehabilitation and of discipline on the part of the prison institution, rather than considering the benefits and the intrinsic good that it can provide for the incarcerated Americans themselves. And not only that, it actually kind of reinstates this line in the sand we have between society and incarcerated Americans, where we treat them as almost like a criminal class that's separate from us to be controlled and feared by society, when instead they're actually a part of our society and they're equal citizens with the rest of us. And so for our paper, we really wanted to focus on democratic solidarity instead. And some of the benefits of focusing on democratic solidarity is that everyone can benefit from reintegrating marginalized individuals. And so when incarcerated Americans experience these educational programs, they're able to better understand some of the moral values that we promote in our society, and they're better able to handle political processes when they are released. Not only that, but it's important to understand that people are capable of change. And so a number that's not really discussed a lot in the literature is that most people when they're incarcerated are actually incarcerated at a fairly young age, and so their brains may not have even fully developed by the time they're incarcerated, and they're definitely capable of change, learning, and growth, and that's something we can discuss later. And then also there's just the important matter of incarcerated Americans are just that. They are American citizens, and they have every right to equal political respect, equal education, and respect from our community as a whole. And so my literature in particular is in response to a piece by Miller and Levine called Reprobation as Shared Inquiry. And they talk about a prison education that they personally run in Washington, D.C., and how they've allowed the incarcerated Americans, and they've brought them into a classroom setting where they can reflect on historical perspectives, reflect on their morality, society's morality as a whole, and they can really learn and grow from their past experiences and become prepared to participate in our political community as a whole. And so what I really want to argue is that there is a huge value in offering liberal arts post-secondary education, not only because of the opportunities available post-release for incarcerated Americans, but also because on the part of us as a public, it shows our expression of inclusion and equality with incarcerated Americans. And so I don't have time to go into all of these pieces separately right now, but this is kind of the outline of our paper, and we focus on the principles, players, and purposes of prison education programs. And so one of the biggest principles is the humanization aspect. A lot of incarcerated Americans live in institutions where they are treated as less than and disrespected by those around them, and so classrooms can provide a neutral space for them to learn and be treated as equals. Not only that, but it's also important to understand that this promotes a form of democratic equality. When we look at some of Diltz's foundational works on democracy, he discusses how it's important to have an educated and informed democratic public. And so because these incarcerated Americans are a part of our political process and a part of our society, they deserve to be informed and be prepared to participate in the political process post-release. And then, of course, there's the added benefit of the opportunities they'll be able to obtain post-release. And the players in this process include incarcerated Americans themselves, educators who often work on a volunteer basis, governments and how they promote these policies to us, the public, and what message we send as a public when we do support education programs. And so one of the biggest purposes that we focus on in our research is the expressive aspect of promoting prison education programs and how it shows a form of solidarity with incarcerated citizens, and it proves to them that we respect them and see them as a part of our society. There's also the added rehabilitative effect, and it helps them to reintegrate better into society. And so when I discuss expressivism, what I'm really talking about is the literature by Joel Feinberg and Nathan Hanna. And essentially, we show our respect and our concern for people who are harmed in society by inflicting pain and hard treatment on those who have done wrong. And this is a kind of justice as desert framing where punishment becomes intrinsically correct based on what the person has done because it's sending a message. But then something to keep in the back of our minds is if that is sending a message, then what kind of message do prison education programs send? And kind of a keystone of our argument is the fact that incarcerated people are not billboards. And so when they're used in this expressive framing, they're treated as a kind of medium where they're conflated with the crime they've committed, and they become a message to the rest of society as to how to behave and how not to behave. But instead, we want to look into making them a part of the broader audience and understand that as a part of our society, they are in the audience. And so what would treating them as part of the audience actually look like? And so that is where solidarity comes in. And I particularly focus on the work of Avery Kohlers and Lisa Gunther and their discussion on how solidarity is a form of political action that's taken in the framing of deference. And so really you want to take action, but you want to take it on others' terms and take it as how they're asking you to take action. And unfortunately, solidarity does come into play in agonistic situations where there's a conflict between two groups. And so right now there's a conflict between society and between the incarcerated Americans, but we really want to bridge that conflict through solidarity, and that's why we want to promote a liberal arts education in particular. A liberal arts education is important because it focuses on the educator being in an equal standing with the person who is being educated. And so it kind of makes incarcerated Americans cooperators in their own education rather than offering them an education in an almost condescending and benevolent way. And so to conclude, we kind of started talking about expressive punishment and how our current system is sending a message to incarcerated Americans and how we can make efforts to change that message. And so we want to argue that this message should instead be based on equal inclusion, respect for individual autonomy and potential, and a belief that in no democratic society should citizens be seen as disposable, undeserving of our respect, and incapable of change. Thank you for listening to me speak.